Berlin, how it likes to see itself. A young and trendy place to party, teeming with the beautiful and the creative from all over the world. It's a completely normal Tuesday evening in West Berlin. The actor Lars Eidinger is behind the decks. The location? The menswear department in the KaDeWe. The Kaufhaus des Westens, meaning Department Store of the West, is reinventing itself and celebrating itself as Berlin's trend barometer. At least, this is how Vittorio Radice sees it. The Italian has been running Germany's most famous department store since 2016, and he has big plans. The KaDeWe has to become part of the Berlin lifestyle. How do people in Berlin live? What are they wearing? What are they thinking? What do they eat? What do they do in the day? These stories need to be told by the KaDeWe. This will make the KaDeWe a place its Berlin customers are proud of, and a store for tourists that is representative of Berlin. The KaDeWe survived the German Empire under Kaiser Wilhelm II, the Weimar Republic, Hitler, and the Cold War. And despite countless injuries, it is still Germany's #1 shopping address. Those looking for luxury in Berlin will find it here. Over 1 million items are sold on an area larger than 60,000 square meters. Barely a shopper's desire exists that cannot be fulfilled, nor a consumer's dream that cannot be awoken here. I think we offer this dream. You can really feel it. We don't sell anything that you really need. With us, it's emotion, it's indulgence. With us, it's spending time, alone with family or with friends. It's like in a fairy tale. You forget your problems, you're in a different world. The KaDeWe shows what capitalism has to offer to those who have made it within the system, through hard work, smarts, or merely thanks to a privileged background. For over 110 years, it's been offering up the treats that ignite our ambition, that incentivize us to be at the very front of this rat race. But also revolutionaries have been drawn to this cathedral of capitalism. In the 1920s, it was Vladimir Mayakovsky, the star poet of a powerful young Soviet Union. First, he would perform in front of the German proletariat, then he would shop for lingerie for his lover back home. His sharp eye appraising the KaDeWe as he shopped. Back in Moscow, his advertising company promoted the department store GUM and its bread, beer, and Mossel Prom cooking oil. Attention, working masses, 3 times cheaper than butter. Cooking oil for the proletariat is not something on offer on the gourmet floor of the KaDeWe. Instead, there is caviar and champagne. Some bottles go for the price of a small car. 150 chefs run 30 gourmet bars. 35,000 products are on display, covering almost everything edible that this planet's flora and fauna has to offer. Every day, thousands of customers make the pilgrimage to the 6th floor of the KaDeWe to dine, shop, and marvel. Here, in the gourmet food hall, is where the store's heart beats. I think my first visit to the KaDeWe was 25 years ago. The newly designed gourmet food floor had just opened. Back then, it was the most beautiful and newest of all of the departments, with a lot of new additions regarding customer service. It drew out and enriched the customer's visit to the store. To this day, the gourmet section remains the figurehead of the KaDeWe. All of my colleagues from all over the world ask me about it. To retain this reputation, we have to be the best and don't want to disappoint our visitors. We have a reputation, and it's the customer's right to demand that we stay true to it. Since taking on his position, Vittorio Radice has been making the department store fit for the future. Selling equals entertainment is his maxim. To this end, hundreds of millions of euros will be flowing into the venerable building by the underground station at Wittenbergplatz in the coming years. Its path into the future is also a return to its roots. The Kaufhaus des Westens always wanted to be more than just a place of retail. The founder of the KaDeWe was Adolf Jandorf, the son of a Jewish cattle merchant from Hengsfeld in the historical territory of Württemberg. After completing his business apprenticeship, he successfully climbed the social ladder. It's no coincidence that this took place in Berlin. Since 1871, the city was the capital of the German Empire, the boomtown of Europe. New factories were continuously being built and new jobs continuously being created. People flooded into the city from all corners of the empire. Berlin promised work and prosperity. The majority of the new Berliners came from the surrounding countryside. There, people had a simple but self-sufficient way of life, a way of life that was ended. Berlin turned farmhands and handmaids into plebs and consumers.
Das ist natürlich ein Prozess der wirtschaftlichen Entwicklung der Arbeit.
This is, of course, the process of economic development and the division of labor. But when someone begins working in a factory, on a 10-hour job, there is no longer time to tend to the garden or to make your own clothes.
Alle Kleider selber zu nähen. Insofern,
in that sense, it is a restructuring of society that can be traced back to the technological changes and is then reflected by new consumer behavior.
Einkaufsformen niederschlägt.
This is where Adolf Jandorf enters the game. In 1892, he opened his first store in Berlin's Spittelmarkt. He was still working for a Hamburg textile goods trader, but this didn't stop the 22-year-old from inscribing his name in large letters above the shop entrance. Work sirens and station clocks now determine the city's rhythm. There is construction noise from all sides and hectic dashing to and fro. Leisure time is a scarce commodity. Adolf Jandorf makes this scarcity into a business. He has the sentence, just 15 minutes, stitched in ornate writing onto small pillowcases. The young salesman moves 1 million of these so-called rest cushions.
Adolf Jandorf is von Zeitgenossen.
Contemporaries describe Adolf Jandorf as a self-made man. He is tough, resilient, a new sort. He came from a humble background, but thanks to this business sense, he became successful. And now, he wants to also be acknowledged in high society. The simple, everyday department stores didn't bring him recognition. They only brought him money. What he really wants now is to be respected by the upper social circles. It was his big dream to become the Prussian Chancellor of Commerce.
Adolf Jandorf expands. By 1906, 5 further department stores have been opened, 1 new shop every other year. In the center of town, on Brunnenstraße. In the southwest of Berlin, on Bell-Allianzer-Straße. In Berlin's southeast, at Cottbusser Damm. In Berlin's northeast, on Große Frankfurter Straße. At the turn of the century, his business has approximately 3,000 employees. Abraham Adolf Jandorf's police file, created to assess whether the salesman was honorable enough to receive the imperial medal. The finances of the Jewish entrepreneur are listed in great detail. Total wealth, 2.5 million marks. Jandorf resided in a 19-room apartment in the distinguished Tiergartenstraße with his wife and son. But Jandorf was not the only department store king in Berlin. Alongside him, there were two further entrepreneurs making a claim to the throne. Tietz from Posen in eastern Prussia, and the Wertheim brothers from the city of Stralsund by the Baltic Sea. In 1897, Wertheim opened a store on the Leipziger Straße that became the epitome of the new big department store culture. Wertheim got the inspiration for his project from Paris. The building, designed by Alfred Messel, was then the largest department store on the continent and the most beautiful in Germany.
It was a place you wanted to go to. That's much cleverer when people don't say you have to go, but when they feel the urge to want to go and see it. Laying out the goods in a way that dazzled people was a completely new invention. It was a real show, and there were large light atriums where the products were presented, with marble-coated halls, columns and statues. That impressed a lot of people because it was not meant to target only the upper classes. This proactive presentation was for all income levels.
The investment paid off. The customers flocked to the store. The ostentatious but artistic luxury elevated the Jewish merchant family's reputation. For the Wertheims, and especially for the company's head Georg, the store became his ticket into society's highest circles. Even the emperor showed himself visiting the store on the Leipziger Straße. So how did the KaDeWe fit into this? Without Wertheim's triumph, the KaDeWe on the Tauentzienstraße would not exist. Amongst the three large Berlin department store owners, Adolf Jandorf was considered the owner for cheap and junk goods. His everyday department stores, geared towards lower income earners, made him a millionaire. But the social acceptance his rivals Tietz and Wertheim enjoyed remained elusive. Jandorf decides to put up with this no longer. In 1905, he buys a large plot of land outside Berlin. Back then, the areas of Schöneberg and Charlottenburg were still independent, but more and more wealthy Berliners were settling in these western suburbias.
It was a city where production was taking place in its center, where it stank and it was dirty, so all those who could afford to moved further west, where the wind was different and one was not constantly bothered by the stench. In that sense, it was a clever location for a department store.
Since 1902, Wittenbergplatz was linked to the main line of the Berlin Elevated Railway, and in 1910 it became a connecting station. Potsdamer Platz, Leipziger Straße and long-distance train station Zoologische Garten are now all only a few minutes away. Such a logistically favorable location spelt a rosy future for the area and Jandorf's newly built department store.
There is this legendary sentence from Adolf Jandorf: I determine location. He was clearly saying, my store, my offer will be so great that no matter where I am, people will come. And he was right. The KaDeWe was in a more elegant residential area and naturally offered a different range. It was well placed from the outset, and that made it special.
Architecturally speaking, Adolf Jansdorf also embarked into uncharted territory. Rather than the opulent Gründerzeit style, he opted for the chaste forms of the nascent modern era. The regimented facade was made from Franconian shell limestone. Artistic decoration was used sparingly. The press praised the simple, professional, dignified elegance. The name of the owner no longer adorned the entrance, but the lettering, Kaufhaus des Westens. A department store's architecture is very important. It may even be the key element that distinguishes it from other stores. The architecture of the store is associated directly with its name. You have the name, the location, the halls that make up the entity, along with the products and the service that you offer. In the future, we also want to have this unique space that is typical for Berlin. A store on split levels, where movement, the rolling of the escalator, generates its own energy. A place that attracts 10, 15, 20 million visitors a year. With his KaDeWe, Jansdorf wanted to attract the wealthy, glamorous Berlin. This is also evident from the large format advertisements that were published for the store's opening, designed by the Austro-Hungarian illustrator August Hajduk. Today, the Kaufhaus des Westens is trying to follow suit, with events like a photo shoot with British star photographer John Rankin. The Scottish photographer, who usually takes portraits of celebrities like George Clooney, Kate Moss, Madonna or the Queen, captures unknown Berliners on film in the KaDeWe.
It's just a privilege to be asked to come and photograph all the Berliners. I love Berlin. I think it's a really creative city. The people I've been meeting are fantastic, great energy, loads of brilliant looks, really amazing people that I've met. And to be able to do the covering, whilst the store's being renovated is an absolute honour.
A few days later, Rankin's portraits adorn the facade of the KaDeWe. Behind them, construction works are beginning. The store remains open while the building is renovated, catapulted into an architectural future, just as it was in Jansdorf's days. He travelled from Germany to England to study Britain's proficiency in modern sales culture. In 1907, this led to the KaDeWe adopting a centralized payment service that ran on air pressure. Payment transactions were processed through kilometers of tubing that ran through the entire store. And no expense was spared when it came to lighting. Over 5,000 bulbs and almost 3,000 special light fixtures illuminated the new store. Its annual energy use was equivalent to that of a small town with 100,000 inhabitants. The Kaufhaus des Westens became the seal of a highly modern department store. Jansdorf needed qualified staff to run it, but they were scarce in Berlin. To hinder employees from leaving for the competition, default provisions were put into employment contracts. Nevertheless, Jansdorf succeeded in poaching over 100 staff members from the Wertheim luxury department store for the new KaDeWe. This was the start of a string of lawsuits, documented in Jansdorf's police file. Jansdorf, Wertheim, Tietz. Around 1900, 80% of all German department stores had founders with Jewish origins. Opposition to this booming store business had anti-Semitic undertones from the outset. Medium-sized enterprises, and especially owners of small shops, felt threatened by the department store group.
It was no coincidence that it was Jews who made this new operating modus so big. They were not represented as merchants in the local groups and guilds, so they had to create their own paths, and it was the path of the department store that brought many founders great success.
Und mit diesem Weg des Warenhauses hatten halt eben viele Gründer.
And this anti-Semitism was, of course, immediately seized upon by the nationalists and used accordingly.
Aufgegriffen und dann halt eben auch entsprechend eingesetzt.
The 100,000 Jewish people living in Berlin knew how important it was to fit in. The majority considered themselves citizens of the German state. Often, they even changed their denomination to gain social recognition. In 1906, Georg Wertheim was christened in the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church. But even as a freshly baptized Christian, the multimillionaire was still subjected to anti-Semitic hostility. Jandorf stays who he is and hopes his new KaDeWe will gain him his long-desired recognition in high society. The man who gives him a helping hand is Rama V, the King of Siam. Following the opening, the king rents the entire KaDeWe for 2 days and purchases over 250,000 marks worth of goods. An astonishing sum, considering that the sailor suits worn by his children cost only 5 marks in 1907. Today, single-digit price tags are a rarity in the children's department of the KaDeWe. Luxury fashion brands have long discovered that market segment for themselves. Were the King of Siam to buy a suit for his children today, he would be parting with several hundred euros. We have the 650 euro jacket, but there's also a 15 euro jacket beside it. What ultimately counts is that the jacket for 650 euros and the one for 15 euros are presented with the same approach, the same smile, the same service. I'll let you try on this jacket for 650 euros, but I'll also let you try on the 15 euro jacket with the same demeanor. This gives you as a customer the opportunity to decide according to your own feelings.
Hai la possibilità di scegliere a tuo agio.
The Kaufhaus des Westens is still the first address for celebrities when it comes to shopping. The store frequently hosts fashion shows and product presentations. Stars, celebrities, flashing light bulbs, all included. The target demographic is young and international. Trendsetters in the New Berlin, as they're known in the boardroom. Not an easy crowd to attract in times where online shopping is booming.
At the moment, it is very, very important for us to be a location. We want to be far more than just a department store. We want to be a place people go to, where you meet up and share and where you experience something and feel looked after. We firmly believe that what is called over-the-counter trade, which is a slightly unflattering term, has a future, because people go where there are other people.
A concept that will only work if the staff are a part of it. In the KaDeWe, the New Berlin's diversity is reflected. Most of the salespeople have ethnically diverse backgrounds. Chinese, Arabic, Turkish, Spanish and Russian are spoken. And all efforts are made to ensure one is on a par with the colourful customer base in all things style. Everyone shops with us, no matter what they think or do. But we have all types of people who sell for us as well. We have staff covered in tattoos who have earrings and piercings. I think that is a transformation in department stores, and for us in particular.
We always try to be ahead of the curve, but you have to let truth lead. The city dictates the pace, and we have to follow.
Once again, the KaDeWe wants to be ahead in this race. One of the reasons that the architecture firm chosen to redesign the building was Weimar, the company of the Dutch star architect Rem Koolhaas. Ippolito Pestillini Laparelli is managing the operation for the new KaDeWe. The KaDeWe was interesting for us because of its unusual history. The politics and history of Berlin over the past century flow into the building. And a department store of this magnitude gives us the opportunity to experiment with the space in all kinds of ways. The core idea of the architect's team is dividing the store into quarters. Each of the quarters is to lure in a very specific clientele with its individual design and products. We like the idea of seeing the KaDeWe as a part of Berlin, but also as its own whole city. Each quadrant will have a distinct layout, content and interior design. Each quadrant will have its own entrance and exit to the surrounding streets. This is an interesting aspect. This makes its connection to the city much more open and perhaps more democratic, as it will not just be the main entrance that takes you into the building. The customers are reunited on the newly designed top floor, a restaurant under a glass and steel construction that will be a viewing platform and main attraction for the whole city. The top floor will still be accessible by 2 lifts after the store shut. After all, the KaDeWe should stay open after closing hours. The building should be used as much as possible, also at night time. The basic idea is to step back into a real dialogue with the city and not just use the building commercially or as a tourist attraction. The KaDeWe has always been available to everyone, but then, just as now, its goods have not. Even the most daring architectural concept will never change that. In 1918, the attempt to realign the relationship between rich and poor is dared in Germany. After 4 years of war, the tired masses rise up. There is revolution in Berlin. The emperor flees, and in front of the old palace, Karl Liebknecht proclaims the Free Socialist Republic of Germany. Workers' and soldiers' councils are formed. They are to have their say in factories and barracks. But in the city's large department stores, the spark doesn't quite ignite. What fails to spark in the department stores of Berlin finally fails in the whole of Germany. The revolution is half-lived. The monarchy may be dead, but capitalism lives on stronger than ever. Berlin in the 1920s. The city's population has grown to 4 million. After the sacrifices of the war and the confusion of the revolution, people are desperate for some light entertainment. It's the beginning of the Roaring Twenties. The city boasts 363 cinemas and 49 theatres, and there is no lack of clientele. In the 20s, West Berlin becomes the city's new center stage. Around the KaDeWe, countless bars, cafes, dance clubs, cabarets and brothels open their doors. From the travesty bar Monaco to the exclusive Kakadu bar, to the Heaven and Hell bar on the Kurfürstendamm, known for its naked chorus line. In the Vaterland venue, the Sid K's Fellows play jazz, and Berlin showgirls are showing some leg. These are also golden times for Berlin's luxury department stores. Fashion is changing at a quicker pace, and those with money are keen to keep up. Wertheim's annual turnover rises to 80 million Reichsmark, and the KaDeWe enjoys record sales. Even the Parisian Galeries Lafayette are drawn to Berlin, but the rulers of Berlin's department stores block the project. In 1929, Rudolf Karstadt opens his first Berlin department store at Hermannplatz, a spectacular freestanding new building that is a clear nod to the skyscrapers of New York. From its own underground station on the lower floor, escalators lead all the way to the top of the 56-meter towers. A retail market battle rages between Berlin's department stores. Competition gets tougher and advertising more aggressive.
The department stores were in constant competition. There was an industry magazine called Das Schaufenster, meaning the shop window, where the window decorations were essentially ranked. And of course, this was the way decorators tried to entice the customers into the shop. The White Weeks was a very important campaign in February, a period when turnover was low, in which you would tempt people to come into the store.
The so-called White Weeks introduced by Tietz at Alexanderplatz were also adopted by the competition. Berlin's stores took swings at each other with fierce discount offers. In the midst of it was the KaDeWe. However, from 1926 onwards, the store was without its founder, Jandorf. The 56-year-old entrepreneur sold his stores and settled into retirement, but didn't have long to enjoy the fruits of his labors. In 1932, Jandorf died of appendicitis. The KaDeWe is now part of the retail empire that makes up Hermann Tietz & Co. The new owners add more stories to the building and make expansive modernizations in line with the style of the times. The most spectacular addition, a roof terrace with relaxing deck chairs, just as one would find on a cruise ship. A store needs to be renewed every 20 or 30 years, reinvented. There's a new technology for transportation, air conditioning, lighting, the movement of goods, the shop windows. All this needs to be redesigned, so a modern store is on show. Modernization, new airports, new accommodation and new restaurants always confront customers. And when they come here, they also want to see a new department store. Then, as now, a renewal is to help the store in the battle against its competitors. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the East, the former center of the city, becomes the new hotspot. The Scheunenviertel, which was mainly populated by Jewish East European migrants, becomes the home for artists and gallerists in the early 90s. Designers and fashion creatives follow suit and open their small boutiques. Now, there is shop upon shop in the trendy neighborhood. Young store owners wait for their fashion-conscious customers. And just around the corner, large shopping malls lure thousands of visitors with clothes and more at discounted prices. To combat the new competition from the reawakened East, the head of the KaDeWe is banking on the history of the store and the aura of old West Berlin.
Vado spesso.
I'm often in Mitte. The center of town has a very special character.
È molto particolare, Mitte. È quasi.
The Berlin tourist comes here, as does the local, but he comes and goes again.
A Berlino oppure il locale.
He doesn't take part in what's going on.
Ma quasi ci va e poi esce, non partecipa, non è quasi partecipante.
Berlin Mitte was reconstructed, but the area's much-needed patina was taken. Here, in the West, there's more life, more truthfulness.
Qua c'è più vita, più vero.
And certainly more history. At the end of the 20s, the global recession also hits Germany. Purchasing power plummets. Berlin's lucrative department stores are now making millions in losses. It is the hour of the banks. They handed out loans and gained access to the great retail empire. Economic decline and mass unemployment bolster the political periphery. The Nazis inflame anti-Semitic resentment of small traders worried about their livelihoods. The National Socialist Party promises to crush the power of the large Jewish department store group. On January the 30th, 1933, Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. The 1st of April sees the first boycotts against Jewish stores, doctors, and lawyers. A demonstration by Hitler supporters files past the KaDeWe to the Lustgarten. Here, the Nazi propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels, makes a speech.
Meine Volksgenossen und Volksgenossinnen, heute Morgen 10 Uhr hat der Boykott begonnen.
The operation only has limited success. Most customers remain loyal to the Jewish merchants. And within the Nazi Party, the realization dawns quickly that such repression is directly damaging the banks, whose millions in credit are redeemed by the stores. The department store boycott is aborted. The National Socialist propaganda backpedals.
The Nazis let the department stores be, something one so aptly calls the irony of history. The stores were targeted by Nazi propaganda, but once the Nazis came to power and had the opportunity to do away with the stores, they didn't. Instead, they saw the shop's economic advantages. New slogans were introduced. Every purchase creates jobs. In this way, it was rendered ideologically legitimate to keep the department stores running, that they had fought against for so long.
The Nazis now turn their attention from the department stores to their Jewish owners. They are bullied into giving up their executive positions and sell their company shares. The banks are compliant to Hitler's scheme. The Tietz family, the new owners of the KaDeWe, is also a target.
Nach 1933 geriet halt im Hermann Tietz dann in...
After 1933, Hermann Tietz was beset with difficulties. A huge loan to the tune of 14 million was needed, and this loan was stopped in the spring of 1933, although everything had been approved. And then the Nazis got involved. Apparently, it went all the way to Hitler. And then it was declared that the loan would only be granted if a so-called Aryanization took place. So the Jewish business owners would have to give up part of their position.
First, Jewish owners had to vacate the boardrooms, and later they would have to hand over their company shares. The management of the Tietz department stores, newly named Hertie, is, with the blessing of the Nazis, taken over by former KaDeWe employee Georg Karg.
Georg Karg had barely any equity, but was now made guarantor for the banks. He was the security that a 14 million Reichsmark loan would be safely implemented.
In Höhe von 14 Millionen.
And that, with barely anything to offer, quite an accomplishment, I have to say.
Ja, verhältnismäßig wenig auf der Tasche, reife Leistung, kann ich da nur sagen.
What starts at the very top seeps to the lowest levels. Jewish employees are removed from all the business activities. In August 1933, all non-Aryan employees of the former Tietz department stores, including the KaDeWe, must leave. Several years later, many of them will fall victim to the Nazis' extermination policy. The KaDeWe profits from the economic revival that accompanies Hitler's first years in office. For the 1936 Olympics, the Kaufhaus des Westens proudly presents itself as the German equivalent of Macy's, Harrods, and the Galerie Lafayette. But this era ends abruptly when Germany plunges the world into a war, and the bombs soon start falling on Berlin. At the end of November 1943, the Allies bomb the area around Wittenbergplatz underground station. Images from the days that followed. The KaDeWe, completely gutted by fire. After the war, Berlin is not only a demolished but also a separated city. Whilst the rubble is cleared in the east as well as the west, a new Cold War begins. In 1948, the Deutschmark is introduced in the western sector of Berlin, the starting point for the German economic miracle. And one of the first to profit from it is Georg Karg.
After the war, Georg Karg paired up with the Aryanizer of Wertheim and bought his Wertheim company shares. He became one of the biggest department store owners in the post-war period.
In July 1950, the KaDeWe opens its doors again. On the day of the opening, 180,000 people crowd onto the Wittenbergplatz. The store's glory days have reawakened.
Wo lange Jahre Schutt lag, liegen wieder Seidenstoffe. Wo nichts war, gibt es wieder alles für die einkaufsfreudigen Hausfrauen des Berliner Westens. Zwei alte Bekannte sind wieder zusammengekommen. Das KaDeWe und seine Berliner.
After the division of Berlin, the name Kaufhaus des Westens gains a whole new dimension. While scarcity is administered in the socialist East, spending is overflowing in the West. Its shopping windows become a testament to the superiority of the capitalist system. No visitor to the city misses out on making a courtesy call at the store.
The name, that was not the intention at all, but the Kaufhaus des Westens became the symbol of the Golden West. It fitted wonderfully into the city with a wall.
Politicians are aware of the KaDeWe's symbolic value. In 1956, American Week, Karg's son Hans-Georg admires beach clothes made in America with the US ambassador. The shifty role of the Kargs in the Nazi era, forgotten. It is continuations like these that drive students in West Berlin onto the streets in the late 1960s. The unprocessed Nazi past delegitimizes the entire system. The Kaufhaus des Westens is the system's poster child. For the young demonstrators, the shop is the embodiment of the purely profit-maximizing capitalist world. Stones are thrown through the store's windows. Inside the store, they try to stay in step with the rebellious climate of the times, at least when it comes to fashion. March 1968, the KaDeWe fashion show by the British celebrity designer Mary Quant. Half a century later, it is again young, wild creatives who are to make the traditional store more attractive to a new client base. The invitation to the Vogue Fashion Night in Berlin extends to all that is fashion in Germany. The theme, Punk Deluxe to Perfect Pink. Christiane Arp is also there, editor of the German Vogue and self-proclaimed fan of the KaDeWe.
I think the typical German store is less about luxury and pleasure than meeting needs. The KaDeWe does more than satisfy needs. It inspires and energizes. And that, for me, is the difference between a department store and the KaDeWe.
The Vogue editor is confident that the KaDeWe will remain the top address in Berlin in the future, especially once the architectural restructuring has been completed.
I think shopping has to offer a world of experience nowadays. We all see so much. We have constant access to everything. In the small village where I was born, I have access to the whole world when it comes to buying beautiful things. That used to be different. And I think places like this have to manage to physically bring me here and discover something that I would otherwise not have bought. That will incentivize me to come back. And I think if I've understood the KaDeWe's plans correctly, it will definitely succeed in doing that.
The rejuvenation of the store ordered by its new management is long overdue. The KaDeWe has rested on the laurels it gained during the Cold War for too long. A lonely lighthouse of sophisticated consumer spending in the shadow of the Berlin Wall. The port of call for wealthy Berlin society, well-mannered and tasteful. The last great triumph, the fall of the wall. After all, the revolt of the East Germans against their authoritarian regime was also fueled by their desire for unlimited consumption. In November 1989, the doors to this supposed earthly paradise stood open. First destination for many East Germans, the Kurfürstendamm, and of course, the Kaufhaus des Westens, the legendary KaDeWe.
The KaDeWe was downright raided. A flood of Trabant cars that stopped right in front of the KaDeWe. Everyone just stopped their cars and people rushed in and stared in awe. The shops, it's totally overfilled but interesting. They have everything that we don't know about.
The different peoples from the crumbling Soviet bloc are hot on their heels. Poles, Czechoslovakians, Romanians, Bulgarians, Russians. And last but not least, wealthy Chinese are beginning to flock to the KaDeWe in droves. The Spartan Maoist style no longer satisfies the elite from the People's Republic. There is barely a label today that can survive without cheap production in China. This is common knowledge for the customers from Beijing, who still come to the KaDeWe seeking authentic European goods.
Of course, there is a focus on the classic luxury items, but there is a huge interest in made in Germany. Everything that is steel and from Germany, so pots, knives, quality cutlery, the Chinese customers love that and buy a lot of it.
Tourists, no matter whether they come from Beijing, St. Petersburg, Paris or provincial Germany, make up half of the KaDeWe's turnover. The Berliners themselves supply the other 50%. However, they're becoming an unpredictable variable, spoiled by the plentiful offer of the shops in the capital and 24/7 online shopping. To enthrall new and old Berliners for the KaDeWe is, once again, the goal of the recently begun modernization program. For those that live in Berlin, the KaDeWe is their store. The store has had quite a few owners, but the real owners of a department store are the people of the city where it's located. The store was here when you were born and will be there when you die. For 50, 60, 70 years, it was always there, and it hopefully always will be. For over 110 years, dreams have been sparked and satisfied in the Kaufhaus des Westens. The KaDeWe is Berlin's main stage for the interplay between goods and money. A time-old spectacle that will continue here as long as it finds an audience.